Greetings and welcome to today's segment of Front Pages, where every weekday I summarize and find the most interesting parts of the day's headlines from 5 different newspapers from around the world. My quest is to weed out the facts as they're reported in each newspaper, and I'll do my very best to find the most interesting stories out there. I'm your host, Mhammami, and let's get started here at home with the first newspaper, the Daily Sabah. They've gone with a local story with headline reading, Heavy Snow Before Spring Kicks Off. This is, of course, a local story, an easy one. Possibly the last bout before spring kicks off. Heavy snowfall has blanketed many parts of Turkey. In northwestern Turkey, Sakarya, Düzce, Bartın and Zonguldak provinces. Some 361 settlements have been closed to traffic. Now, municipalities in the region and in the country's biggest metropolis, Istanbul, are striving hard to keep the roads free of snow to prevent any collisions and accidents. Turkey's flag carrier, Turkish Airlines, also cancelled 100 flights scheduled for Saturday due to the bad weather conditions, and also 100 flights scheduled for Monday, the 21st, I beg your pardon, were also cancelled. 80 flights as well out of Sabiha Gökçen. The airline made a statement. Now, that is what's going on here. Not a lot, but let's move on. We've got a lot to get through. 5 newspapers. Let's take a look at the next one. Pakistan Today. This is going to hit the stories a lot. We've been talking about Ukraine a lot. We've been talking about Russia a lot. This is also a major story headline. No trust vote speaking convenes crucial National Assembly session on the 25th. This is actually a top story. We know it's going to be talking about it a lot soon. Now, the National Assembly Speaker, Asad Kaiser, has convened a crucial session of the lower house to deliberate on the no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Imran Khan on March the 25th. Now, to get a little bit more information about this, joining me today to talk to us through the latest in Islamabad is my very famous and my very favourite journalist, Mr. Javed Rana. Javed, thanks for joining me here on Front Page. It's good to see you, sir. Now, this is a headline that we've seen out of Pakistan today, but you're there. What's it all about? Talk us through it.
Well, it seems that perhaps the days of Prime Minister Imran Khan's government have been numbered. After over 2 dozens of its MPs, the members of the parliaments, they switch over their loyalties to the opposition parties. The Prime Minister Imran Khan has been accusing them that they have been paid millions of dollars in return of switching over their loyalties. Now, the government has come up with a petition which has been filed with the top court of the Pakistan, and within the next couple of days, it is going to come up with a legal opinion on whether or not these MPs can be disqualified for five years or for their lifetime. So let's see how things unfold in the Supreme Court. But there is a bigger picture, and that is that the Pakistan's military's role. Pakistan's military has been at the heart of the controversy for making and breaking government in the past, and this particular government has also been what the opposition parties say was manufactured by the military in 2018's general elections. Now, it seems the military has withdrawn its tacit support, and the army is projecting itself as a neutral player in this ongoing tense situation between the opposition and the ruling party. But I think it appears that there is a tacit support of the military in favor of the opposition parties, which has emboldened them to actually win over the loyalties of the ruling party's members. Now, if the Supreme Court comes up with a judgment which says that these disloyal members would be disqualified for the 5 years or for any term, that means these members may return to their original party. But if it doesn't happen, then there is a greater possibility that this government is going to come to an end within the next couple of weeks. But giving you a bigger picture, and that is that the military has not been happy with the Prime Minister Imran Khan, partly because there was a controversy on the appointment of the country's intelligence chief, the army chief, a couple of months back. and partly also because of the fact that the Prime Minister Imran Khan has been inching towards China and Russia, something the military doesn't feel comfortable with, and military believes that it needs to strike a balance. But I think there is a bigger picture, and that is that the political interest, economic interest of the power elites of Pakistan, the politicians and the retired military generals, that lies with the West. They have their properties there, and therefore they don't want to switch over to the China. China's investment in Pakistan has been huge. In comparison to China, the Americans' investment or the other Western countries' investment in Pakistan has not been that much forthcoming. It was largely aid. It ended into the corruption. It ended up into corruption, and also it goes back to the Western countries in form of different consultancies. So let's see how things unfold. But certainly, the military's role is going to be very important in this ongoing tense situation in Pakistan.
Awesome. Javed Rana made it very clear. Now we know what's going on. We'll probably be in touch again to talk to you again about this. It's also a very hot topic. Thanks a lot, Javed. Take care. We'll speak again soon. There you go. That was Javed in Islamabad giving us the latest on what's going on over there. It looks like Imran Khan could be on his way out, but we'll see. We'll keep you posted here, of course, here on Anews. But we're here on Front Page. Let's continue now with Front Pages. Let's go over now to China. The Global Times have gone with the headline, of course. We know it's all about Ukraine, it's all about Russia, but they've gone with the line, China won't be coerced by US on its ties with Russia. Now, remember, these are newspapers written by the Chinese. Now, after the video call between Chinese and US top leaders, the US side and Western media this is written in their words, by the way, remember, trying to hype a narrative that Washington is warning Beijing that any attempt to provide military support to Moscow would bring consequences. However, Chinese experts said such a ridiculous approach is an arrogant and useless coercion that is doomed to fail. And China has strong confidence in its foreign policy on the Ukraine issue that it will not be coerced by anyone. Now, the newspaper goes on to say that the Chinese state councillor and foreign minister Wang Yi said on Saturday that China's position on the Ukraine issue is objective and fair, and time will prove that it's on the right side of history. Now, the White House, of course, released a transcript of the background press call by senior administration official on the video call between the Chinese and US top leaders. And the official said in the statement that President Biden made clear the implication and consequences of China providing material support, if China were to provide material support, that is, to Russia, as it prosecutes its brutal war in Ukraine, not just for China's relationship with the United States, but with the wider world. Now, we put together a small package for you to sum all this up. Take a look at this now.
The fault line in China right now is their determination to avoid a breach of existing US financial sanctions against Russia that would trigger any secondary sanctions against themselves. The continued support by Xi Jinping of the Russian position in its essence over Ukraine has been very much driven again by Xi's personal relationship with Vladimir Putin. But within the Chinese system, there are a range of different views on this. And the foreign and security policy establishment would be acutely conscious of the problems which have now been created in Europe over Europe's perceptions of China siding with the Russians over Ukraine.
I think this time around, the US is implementing a new strategy to preempt what China might provide Russia by basically putting the intelligence out there and sending a warning signal to Beijing that we knew this is coming. So you better think about the consequences when you decide to take those steps that we have already warned you about. If China adjusts its policy towards Russia today, it raises a question as for Xi Jinping, Chinese president's wisdom of putting China in that position at the first place. And this year, we're having the 20th Party's Congress, and Xi Jinping is aiming for his third term. So a major blunder or a major shift of China's policy on Russia means that Xi Jinping has done something wrong. And I think that is a position or a image or narrative that Xi Jinping is not going to get into.
China is straddling a line here because Putin, Russia, dependent on China for sales of energy to China. The Chinese could maybe buy arms from Russia after this war. That puts China, in a very strong position vis-a-vis Russia. But on the other hand, if they try to evade the sanctions, it could be that we're headed into a very different situation in which the US then starts to impose secondary sanctions on China.
Right, you're back again with me here in the studios. Okay, we're front pages now. I told you we're looking at the 5 newspapers from around the world. Up next, though, is the United Kingdom. I've gone with The Telegraph today. Let's take a look at what they're talking about. They're saying, Chancellor hints at fuel duty cut of 5 pence per litre. Now, this is, of course, a big story that we've all been talking about. The cost of living around the world has gone up, of course, added to by the Ukraine and Russian crisis. But the Chancellor hints, as I say, to this. Now, Rishi Sunak is the Chancellor of Exchequer. He's poised to cut fuel duty this week in a bid to stave off a cost of living crisis. But the Chancellor faced warnings last night that simply making petrol more affordable would be too little, too late for many struggling families. Mr. Sunak had originally hoped to avoid major spending measures in Wednesday's mini-budget, but he is now considering a temporary cut in fuel duty of up to 5 pence per litre in the wake of the Ukrainian invasion. Hinting at the move yesterday, the Chancellor also said he was determined that the cost of living, or the cost of filling, should I say, up a car should not become prohibitively expensive. Last night, though, that the Chancellor is also to have said, or late last night, should I say, is that he could ease the pressure of the 1.25% in national insurance hike by raising the threshold at which people start to pay tax. Senior Tories welcomed the prospect of help for motorists last night, but urged Mr. Sunak to go much further to tackle what looks set to be the worst cost of living crisis in half a century. Okay, that is our 4 newspapers. We're on to our final newspaper now. I've gone with the Financial Times. We are, of course, talking about the Russia and Ukraine. Let's see how the FT Pink Pages have reported on their headlines. They've gone with sheltering civilians, bombed as fierce fighting grips Mariupol. Now, this is, of course, been talking about it all day. Russia had given Ukrainian forces a Monday deadline to surrender control of the besieged port city of Mariupol. Several hours have now passed since a deadline set by Russia for Ukraine rejected the ultimatum. The scene of some of the heaviest fighting since Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine more than 3 weeks ago. Now, in a statement carried by Russian state news agency RIA Novosti, Moscow's defense ministry said it was opening humanitarian corridors out of Mariupol from 10 a.m. local time on Monday and told Ukrainian forces defending the city to lay down their arms and leave. Now, it all depends on Kiev's response. Well, we know what Kiev replied. Kiev's responded to it in writing. It said that it would not do that. Russia, which has framed its invasion as a special operation to liberate Ukraine, claiming Kiev was using Nazi foreign mercenaries and bandits to hold up to 130,000 civilians hostage, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. It has denied any responsibility for the overwhelming civilian casualties in Mariupol and blamed them all on provocations by Ukrainian nationalists. Now, the ultimatum came as fierce fighting engulfed Mariupol on Sunday, with Russian forces tightening their grip and bombing a school where about 400 residents were sheltering. The eastern port has been devastated by relentless shelling, with whole neighborhoods reduced to piles of smoldering rubble. Electricity, gas and water have been cut off, and trapped residents are without food. Ukraine's armed forces said that the situation was difficult. There is famine in the city, street fights, people are trying to leave. Local authorities in Mariupol said that civilians are still under the rubble after the school bombing. Russia's advance in Mariupol came after Kiev said it had been cut off from the strategically important Sea of Azov, a conduit to the Black Sea. Capturing Mariupol would give the Russians control of a huge swath of Ukraine's southern coast. Kiev also said Moscow had used its new hypersonic missiles against civilian areas elsewhere in Ukraine, in the first confirmation that Kremlin had deployed the weapons in the conflict. Moscow said it used the Incl, which it claims can travel at 10 times the speed of sound, twice in the past 3 days to destroy fuel depots in southern Ukraine and to target munition storage facilities in the country's west. So, 5 newspapers. We've gone from the UK, we've gone to Pakistan, we've gone to China. We started off here in Turkey and we ended with the Financial Times. That wraps up the top headlines of the day. Be sure to tune in tomorrow. We're back on a regular time at the same time at 9:30 GMT, where I'll be here giving you a synopsis of the front pages from around the world. I'm your host, Mhammami.